What's something that was designed for the use of one sex but is now predominantly used by the other? Old Spice was launched by Schulten Inc. in 1937. William Lightfoot Schultz was inspired by his mother's potpourri, and as a result, the first Old Spice product in 1937 was a woman's scent called Early American Old Spice. The product was received well, and therefore followed with Old Spice for Men in 1938. I love Old Spice and I am female. My husband and I share deodorants. I'm hoping one day Old Spice will make a line for women. Sea Hag, Forest Witch. Something tough and not floofy, like lavender flower blossom or something. I didn't know Old Spice used to be for women. Reclaim Old Spice. Women's deodorant is trash. Can we please get men's deodorant for women? I want to smell like a forest witch. I use Old Spice Wilderness with lavender, and I would absolutely use Sea Hag in a heartbeat. I remember reading somewhere that Kleenex was made for ladies to remove their makeup, but their husbands were blowing their noses in them. And now we all blow our noses in them. That's not all I blow in them. Get a load of this guy. Filtered cigarettes in general. But Marlboro made the biggest leap in terms of gendered marketing. Once that whole conspiracy theory came out that like cigarettes are I don't know bad for you or something, and more people switched to filtered cigarettes, it's filtered, that means it's good for you. Was around the time that the Salt of the Earth classic American Marlboro Man came into existence. Trying to distance the brand from its previously woman-focused advertisements. Marlboro Reds referenced the color of the filter, which was red, so that it wouldn't show lipstick. Kinda funny that reds are considered manly now, and women are more likely to smoke the lights which have white filters. Interesting is like an example of marketing intention vs. context. Marlboro Reds wanted to make lipstick marks invisible, but TV and cinema romanticized the lipstick mark. So lipstick in a white filter became symbolism for sex. Because she's smoking his cigarette, those leg stirrups they use at the gynecologist were invented for removing kidney bladder stones in men. They used to cut from below the testicles and cut right through the prostate. It had a very low survival rate and was not approved by the medical profession. The original Hippocratic Oath had a section on not cutting for stone, meaning they swore not to surgically remove the stones because of it. They later removed that section of the oath, otherwise a bunch of urologists would be out of a job. Bladder stones, not kidney stones. To get to a kidney stone through the taint, you would be elbow deep in the patient. I believe you just found the reason the survival rate was so low. Victoria's Secret was originally supposed to be a place for men to buy lingerie for their wives and not feel embarrassed, but now it's almost exclusively shopped at by women. There's a great monologue in The Social Network about this. A Stanford MBA named Roy Raymond wants to buy his wife some lingerie, but he's too embarrassed to shop for it at a department store. He comes up with an idea for a high-end place that doesn't make you feel like a pervert. He gets a 40.0 bank loan, borrows another 40.0 from his in-laws, opens a store, and calls it Victoria's Secret. Makes $500,000 his first year. He starts a catalog, opens 3 more stores, and after 5 years he sells the company to Leslie Wexner and the Limited for $4 million. Happy ending, right? Except 2 years later, the company's worth $500 million and Roy Raymond jumps off the Golden Gate Bridge. Poor guy just wanted to buy his wife a pair of thigh highs. He put 4 years of work in and had 100.0 of loans, and when it was finally doing well, he sold it for $4 million. How could you be so good and bad at business at the same time? I don't know. 4 meters is a nice sum for 1982. I doubt the movie is accurately portraying his mental issues rather than his regret at not making more money. It was only $1 million, not $4 million. He didn't kill himself until a decade after the sale. He founded a bunch of utterly failed business after leaving VS, where he had a job as president under Wexner. So really, whole series of mistakes. Guys, I think I found out Victoria's Secret, and now they're closing 250 stores. The quality has gone to shit in the last couple of years. I had a Versus bra in high school that lasted me 4 years, which is crazy long considering I only own 2. I bought one last year and the fabric between the cups ripped in half in 6 months. It's insane how sharply the quality has nosedived. I have underwear from there that I bought in high school 8 years ago that's still in good condition. I bought the same exact cut of underwear from them a year ago, and it's already developed holes. Same. I exclusively bought undies from Versus and they lasted forever. Then I bought a few, and not only did they have less material for the same cut, I hate that, they fell apart before my original ones did. That explains why everything looks sexy, but nothing is comfortable or fits properly. A football thing initially, like young Johnny Depp in Nightmare on Elm's. Heels, if I remember correctly. The Ford Mustang. It was supposed to be a car with a big trunk too. You could fit all the groceries in it. There was even an ad or article stating that you can own a Mustang that matches the color of your lipstick. Makes sense why a lot of old Mustangs are red. I think Mustangs are still probably one of the more popular sports cars for women, even though a lot of men drive them as well. Skirt tender marble literate handle lunchroom brave fuel political nutty. Be happy you don't live near a military base then. Full of 19-year-olds driving Mustangs, Chargers and other Me Too-s. And then Carol Shelby is like, damn, that V8 looks nice in there. UGG boots were originally worn by male surfers, with their girlfriends stealing and wearing them like they would a leather jacket. Edit, I've been educated by my Aussie friends that they're worn by all down under as slippers and such. I was speaking of their history here in the Aus, where they were mostly introduced by surfers on the west coast, and now they are almost exclusively worn by women here. I never got UGGs as a concept. Aren't they terrible with water? How TF are they winter wear? Edit, I've been sufficiently informed that they were created in Australia. My bafflement is their continued use in the same form in snow-prone countries. I believe in Australia, where they originate, they were made more as like house slippers. So I do think their original intention was to be worn outside. As an Australian, I can confirm this is what they are supposed to be used for. Some people wear them outside, but not very often, as they have foam soles that wear out very fast and are terrible for walking in. Edit, they do make leather and rubber-soled ones for outdoor use. Can confirm. Am wearing them now. They're basically the posh version of slippers and super comfortable. Is this how Family Feud gets new questions and answers? Steve Harvey, name one thing that gets harder the longer you stroke it. Contestant 1, a toaster? Steve Harvey, that ain't up there, but good answer. Contestant 2, my penis. Steve Harvey, we asked 100 people, what is the male reproductive organ? Contestant, the penis SH, a WUH. Huh? Audience erupts into laughter. Steve Harvey grabs onto podium to support himself. Laughter gets even louder. SH. Oh lordy. One man goes into cardiac arrest, and many others begin vomiting profusely from laughing too hard. You people need help. The earth shatters, and Satan rises from the underworld to claim unworthy souls. The universe begins rapidly closing in on itself. SH, putting on a weary voice survey, says, the board shows 100 for penis. Harvey is able to get off one more shocked look before existence as we know it comes to an end. Show me breaking the fourth wall. Cigarettes. They were designed for women. To be a more feminine version of a cigar. In the early Renaissance, young, fashionable men just stopped wearing their skirts robes. The old religious men were absolutely scandalized. Edit. Of course, there's more to it than this. But this is the very simplified gist. The scandal wasn't really the leggings. Men had been wearing various types of leggings split hose earlier and then increasingly joint hose by the one for hours for hundreds of years or forever. Really, if you include the various Vikings, Anglo-Saxons, etc., who wore pants before all that. The scandal was that in prior centuries, tunics reached near the knees or were at least long enough to cover the pelvic area. By the late 1300s, though, men started wearing shorter, tighter tunics and jackets, which revealed the pelvis in front and back. Considering at the time that split hose only covered the legs and not the pelvis, this wasn't entirely surprising, since it basically meant that fashionable men started walking around with their underwear exposed. Then they started joining the hose together in back, and putting a codpiece over the front. Then someone had the genius idea to start making codpieces bigger and bigger. DHT cream. They sell it for use as penis enlarging cream, which it doesn't do because men already have high levels of DHT in their bloodstream. However, it does actually make clits permanently larger. Regrow your clit is about that. You really do learn something new every day. Not only am I just amazed, but everyone in that sub just seems to be really factual and supportive. Good for them. Holding doors for people. A woman was supposed to hold the door for a man so he could check for any dangers in the building. The thought was mainly for married couples. but it could be done to a total stranger as well. At some point it flipped and turned to just being a polite thing to do. The theory I heard was that women began to enter first to make sure the man didn't have any enemies in the room because they wouldn't shoot her. Something related to the mafia. Hitachi magic wand. It was originally manufactured for relieving tension and relaxing sore muscles, often used by athletes, but now is famous for its use as a sex toy industrial strength vibrator. And now they relieve tension and relax the whole body instead of one muscle. The instruction manual for the Hitachi magic wand is one of the greatest documents in history, no lie. They know what you're using it for, and they want you to know they know what you're using it for, you dirty little birdies, but they're sure as hell not going to be the ones to come out and say it first. The rated maximum continuous use of your massager is 25 minutes. That's really long enough. Under the section Care After Use and Storage, Cleaning, I present step 3. If necessary, wipe it with a damp cloth, certainly not while it's still plugged into the power source. It says not to use on unexplained calf pain. It says that twice. I would pay $20 for the story behind that. I suspect it has to do with things like deep vein thrombosis, which can present as sudden unexplained calf pain. It's possible that the heavy massage can make the clot shift and migrate around your body. If it gets to the blood vessels that supply the lungs, that's a pulmonary embolism, and that can very easily be. Good night, Vienna. I guess I owe you $20 now. This section, after precautions, might be my favorite section in the manual. The Hitachi massager is designed as a refreshing relief at the end of a busy day, after work, before or after sports. And for removing everyday dullness, your Hitachi magic wand is always ready to help you. Never drop or insert any object into any opening. One of my sisters was given one by her husband as a present, but she didn't care for it. My other sister has a bad shoulder, so she offered it to her as a massager. She mentioned that it had other uses, but perhaps wasn't quite explicit enough about what, and my sister didn't pick up on it. 2 days later, and sis 2 phones, sis 1, furious because her 26-year-old son had dropped by and saw the box lying casually on the sofa and fell about laughing. At least he didn't find her wobbly sausage. I always think of the Sex and the City episode where Samantha tries to return it. Yes, I'd like to return this vibrator. We don't sell vibrators. Yes, you do. I bought it here 6 months ago. That's not a vibrator, it's a neck massager. No, it's a vibrator. Sharper Image doesn't sell vibrators, it's a neck massager. You expect me to believe that women buy these to help their sore necks? I think it was Brookstone. But they had a whole wall of personal massagers at my old mall. Young me thought it was hilarious. I wonder what the founders of the Hitachi magic wand wondered when they started to realize their product wasn't being used for its original purpose. Pink and blue were originally considered colors for boys and girls, respectively. I've heard this, but I never bothered to see when and why it changed. All babies and toddlers wore dresses. Baby blue related to the Virgin Mary is my understanding. And red was manly, apparently. So pink was the childish version of manly red. I had to borrow my hoodie from my friend the other night. Just not right. It's just so much more comfy than using your own hoodies. I really don't know why, but it's true. For the exact same reason that sandwiches taste better when someone else makes it for you. Science. Thanks for the award, new internet friend. Sandwiches are important. This is my life. Fortunately, now my daughter is old enough that she is raised stealing the stolen hoodies from my wife, and shall give them back to you to remember her by when she goes to college. It all comes back around, because she gets to steal them from the college boys. Just wait until she gives you one that wasn't yours from a school she doesn't attend. See, I just went to the shop, walked into the men's section, bought a hoodie, and I keep it with my boyfriend's clothes. Compromise. This is the big brain play. I upvoted this while wearing my husband's hoodie. I mean my hoodie. Mine. Shaving razors were made for men, but women shave a good bit more now, both in frequency and surface area. Makeup, also primarily worn by wealthy men back in the day. Makeup for both sexes is as old as civilization. Face powder, probably. But what about the less subtle stuff like mascara and lipstick? Tedious computing and calculating was seen as women's work through the 1940s. It may be true that computing was a women's job, but the people inventing computers were certainly not trying to create a product for women. For the most part, they were trying to build machines that could replicate the brain. The difference is that now, people in computing use computers to do the calculations. In the 40s, the people in computing, mostly women, were the computers. For example, in the Manhattan Project, the scientists, mostly men, would write down the calculations, and the computers, lots of women, would compute them. Don't think there was much equality between the sexes then. They were made because most women didn't have pockets for pocket watches. Now I pretty much just see men wear them, though they've started to fall out of style. Edit. Alright, I've had about 500 people tell me wristwatches are sew-in right now. I get it. Men began wearing wristwatches before women did, as it was more convenient to wear a wristwatch in the trenches and for WW1 pilots navigating cross-country flights. One of the things that kept pocket watches popular for longer was accuracy in timekeeping. For many years, railroad watches were required by law to be pocket watches of 16 or 18 size. Historically, women wore their watch on a brooch, starting with 8 size in the 1860s, 6 size in the 1870s, 1890 seconds, and 0 size in the early 1900s. When the brooch fell out of style, women began wearing wristwatches. This also happened to coincide with watchmaking production technology being able to mass-produce very tiny movements. It had nothing to do with pockets. I am a certified master watchmaker by the Chicago School of Watchmaking, and I've been restoring antique pocket watches, wristwatches, for 14 years. I'm also a commercial instrument-rated pilot with an interest in early 20th century aviation history. You think they've fallen out of style? I feel like there's a huge resurgence of interest in wristwatches stemming from trends like the G-Shock and Apple Watch in younger people. I casually mentioned that I liked the Hulk Rolex in a college class, and it started a big conversation between, 15 guys about high-end watches out of nowhere. Young dudes still like watches, we just can't afford them. Watch those wristwatches. Watches would like to have a word with you. War-made wristwatches, a manly thing. It allowed them to check the time and coordinate attacks whilst keeping both hands free. Shoot, I had to wear watches both in the military and in my last job. I rarely go out without a watch of some kind, usually a cheap one, but I do have a nice, expensive for me, citizen watch to wear for special occasions. Middle was marketed as non-gender specific headache medication when it was first created. Decades later, they changed to marketing it specifically for treating menstrual cramps and bloating. Some are unwritten, glorious, repeat physical arrest, spoon crush outgoing growth. I was wondering when I would run into this answer. This was the first thing that came to my mind too. I myself am a little hazy on the details, but IRC tampons were first created to plug up bullet holes and stop the bleeding for injured men on the front line. But the nurses serving in the medical facilities in the war soon found out they could. Well, stick it up there and it would serve the same purpose. I don't actually know when this started, but I seem to recall women starting to use them during WW1. This might be total bullshit through, D. When I wrestled in high school, coach would get a box of the smallest tampons, open them up and cut the string off and cut them in half and throw them in our first aid box. Those things were perfect when you get a bloody nose. Just shove it up there as far as you can and get back at it. They also feature in the standard rugby first aid kit. They're used for players with nosebleeds so that they can stay on the pitch. Even at professional and international level, you will sometimes see a player on TV with a pair of tampons up his or her nose. Don't use tampons for trauma wounds, not literally sex-related. But I'd say the MLP fandom, made for little dainty girls, used by old fat guys. Hey, stop excluding the skinny old guys and the young fat guys. Look up the video game Hearts of Iron 4. There is a very detailed mod for ponies going to war in that universe. It get brutal with Griffin on pony genocide, so add war gaming people onto that list. MLP fandom, made for little dainty girls, used by old fat guys. Turns off my work VPN. Opens an incognito window. Oh, that's not nearly as bad as I'd feared. That's almost wholesome, compared to what I was bracing myself for. Automatic cars, they were made for women because it was believed women couldn't or wouldn't be able to use a stick shift, that it was too complicated for them. My ex-girlfriend had to deal with that shit a lot. She worked at a place that loaded cars onto trains, and people would tell her, that car is a manual. We'll get someone else to move it, shed. Just grab the keys, hop in and say, why, before driving off. Every car she's ever owned has been a manual. She's a fucking pro. This is one of those completely bullshit facts people throw around. It was normal for women to drive well before automatic transmission. A lot of people of both gender appreciated the simpler automatic. The manual transmission, North America's most effective theft deterrent. I highly doubt that women were driving regularly before the automatic transmission. Saying this is like saying the smart car was invented because they thought women needed it easier. They do it because everyone wants easier. Are they mostly used by men now? And if so, why? Playgirl. The magazine was founded in 1973 and was supposed to be intended and was marketed as such to women. However, gay men became the most dominant consumer of the magazine. Can confirm. In middle school, a friend brought a Playgirl to school to show off to us girls. This was in the late 80s, early 90s. We had no idea it really existed. You go to the convenience store and all the racks have nude mags for men. So we were in awe. But we really spent the whole time giggling and going, ew. So pretty much the same effect as dick pics today. Nothing enticing about them, except the Big Daddy Kane and Shawn Michaels issues. Anyway, and then we were like, wait, where did you find this? She said her brother had it. We thought nothing of it, until years later when he came out. Birth colors were originally swapped, with soft blue representing femininity and a deep pink to represent masculinity. Deep red was masculine color of blood, so blood didn't show that much, but of course became light pink due to washing, which was why oink was a man's color. I glanced over and misread the title as what's something that was designed for sex but is now used for something else. Same. I was concerned, but obviously still would have scrolled through all the responses like the weird person I am. Names like Ashley, Kim, Beverly, Addison, Shelby, etc. used to be boys' names. Now are mostly girls. I hope eventually people can just pick the name they like without worrying about which gender is using it more. Boys are going to run out of names otherwise. Edit. I wrote Kim twice. I did not include Dana, Harlow, Reagan, Whitney, or Mackenzie though. Until now. Edit 2. Just because it's interesting. Names that are currently tipping over to the girls' side. Sutton, Oakley, Lennon, Emerson. And names that are switching back to unisex. Alexis, Brooke, Diamond, Hillary, Kelly, Kim, Michelle, Quinn, Sandy, and Shannon. Don't worry, we can just keep naming every boy Braden, and Braden. As a guy named Skylar, by the time I die, I expect my name will be considered a female name. Would Lindsay count too, or nah? Hazel used to be a boy's name. I've met exactly 2 Hazels in my life, and both were old men. Just a neat tidbit to add. John Wayne's real name is Marion Wayne, and names that are switching back to unisex. Alexis, Brooke, Diamond, Hillary, Kelly, Kim, Michelle, Quinn, Sandy, and Shannon. Quinn is the only one of these I've ever heard as a boy's name. Carol too. However, Carol Shelby, Leslie, my grandpa hated it. Giving a slightly masculine name to a girl is kind of a no-fail plan though. If the girl grows up to be a tomboy, it works. And if she grows up super girly, it's cute, still. And it's one of the few ways to give your child a fun and different name without making up a name that's just Aiden plus a consonant. Aubrey used to be exclusively male, but now is primarily female, at least in the us. I read about a boy who recently changed his name from Billy because he was bullied for having a girl's name. Not specifically for one gender, but maxi pads came about because nurses in World War I started using the wound packing pads for their periods. Prior to that, women mainly used homemade washable rags, hence the saying on the rag. Computer programming was a job originally intended for women. This whole thread makes you realize how many things are pointless legenda. Fedoras and trilby hats. Both hats are named for the fictional women who wore them. Now they're worn by gross neckbeards in combination with the cheapest black leather duster and katana they can afford. Hey, my katana was over 100 at the mall, dude. Call me cheap again. Dare you? Hey, that's what I thought. Hey, don't diss on the fedora. Perry the platypus looks great in that hat. Purses. Back in the day, all the men carried their coinage in a purse. Although it's making a comeback for modern dudes. It's not a purse, it's a satchel. Indiana Jones had one. It seems predominantly isn't quite understood in its meaning. Yoga, only for men, now it's just women. It's still for everybody, just so happens to be like 98 women. I never knew this. I'm Indian and we had a mandatory yoga class, and no one was really ashamed to do it. Just lazy. Doing some of the difficult asanas positions feels great too, like a little accomplishment. And I just want to say, yoga helps you stay fit and healthy and should be done by everyone. To be honest, seeing a trend here where there's a unisex or male-only thing, and then enough women do it that men no longer want to do it because people now see it as feminine. Most fashion inspired by military uniforms, mostly men, are usually worn by women. Combat boots, epaulets on shoulders, olive drab jackets, berets, etc. Yoga. It was invented by men for men, but for some reason it's mostly women who gravitate towards it, at least in the West. Many men are too afraid to try it, which is a shame because yoga is enjoyable. I really enjoy it and it has a lot of benefits. I'm pretty sure yoga was a religious thing for Hindu people. Okay, fuck you. I laughed. Angry upvote. It only took you 3 words. Genius. Vermouth fortified wine spirit. It was originally designed to be a dedicated ladylike drink for Victorian women. Nowadays, it's pretty much only used in Manhattans and martinis drunk by older men. No, seriously. Shoes with high heels were originally developed by Persian cavalry, as the heels helped their feet stay in the stirrups while they rode and fired arrows. In the West, women wore platform shoes to gain height. Catherine de' Medici is the first European woman recorded to have worn heels in the late 1500s. But heels wouldn't come into the general European fashion consciousness for another 200 or so years, and the trend of women wearing any kind of height-enhancing shoes died with her. In the 1600s, when the Persian Shah sent an envoy of soldiers to Russia, Spain, and Germany to form diplomatic relations, aristocratic European men started emulating the Persian soldiers' footwear. By the time of King Louis XIV's reign in the mid-1600s, high heels were very popular among the male aristocracy, as were stockings. In fact, Louis would only allow favoured members of his court to wear heels, and especially to wear certain coloured heels. A red heel on a shoe was a big deal, as it was a sign of power. You can look at old paintings of the era and actually see who held the king's favour by the kind of shoes they were wearing. Anyone else caught wearing such footwear could risk having their head chopped off. The irony of this would take a little over a century to play out. In the mid-1700s, men wearing heels would start to fall out of fashion as they began to become more feminized with the advent of women's shoes starting to grow heels of their own. The French Revolution is what really killed the male high-heeled shoe trend, as any man wearing one was part of the aristocracy and likely to lose their head. Ultimately, if you wanted to avoid losing height from the top, you had to lose height from the bottom. Best not to dig your heels in on this fashion trend. Informative and punny. Thanks, Satan. Wristwatches. In the 19th century, they were almost exclusively ladies' jewelry, tiny, delicate and feminine, with an emphasis on show over timekeeping. For a man to wear one would have been unthinkably effeminate. A real man had a pocket watch, until WW1, when they proved to be too impractical and cumbersome on the front lines. Existing pocket watches had lugs and straps attached for conveniently wearing on the wrist, and the wristwatch's masculine accessory was born. Now, a complicated watch the size of a soup plate on the wrist is almost a sine qua non of masculinity. Jansport. It used to have a male counterpart called Johnsport, but everyone liked Jansport better. Wait, what? We have the equivalent Lynx in the UK, and it's universally accepted as the sign of a shove and an instant turn-off for any woman. I personally like to use Axe to fuel my potato cannon. Oh man, I tried Old Spice Wolfthorn and haven't bought a ladies' deodorant since. The chainsaw was originally invented in the 1800s as a surgical tool to help with childbirth. Edit, it was 1783. Horses. Hear me out. Back in the Wild West, they were a badass symbol of masculinity and now have shifted to being used often in horseback riding, especially the small ones, which mostly women participate in. Viagra was intended to pump blood into the heart, but during the trial, they found out it pumps blood somewhere else. Pilots. Joseph Pilates originally started out as a boxer and developed his exercise regime to rehabilitate injured soldiers at a military base during WW1. While unverified, a popular advertisement for his routine was that none of his patients got the Spanish flu when it hit their base. After, he reluctantly began training ballet dancers, where it then transitioned to being practiced predominantly by women. Cheerleading was originally for men, but women took over somehow. Voting in the United States. So voting is predominantly used by women? Pretty much voting anywhere there's voting. Jock straps were made for men, obviously. However, the first general sports bra was made out of 2 jock straps in 1977. They called it the jock bra. Sports bras have clearly evolved past their precursor, but their original form was made out of menswear. A woman could get arrested and jailed for wearing them under cross-dressing laws in the UK. It was still illegal in parts of the US for a woman to wear them well into the mid-20th century, and I believe a student took her school to court because they expelled her for wearing trousers. According to them, the Bible says that men shouldn't wear women's clothes and women shouldn't wear men's clothes, and trousers are men's clothes, yet another thing Christians seem to be able to overlook at their convenience. But that's not a discussion for here. Historically, women wore trousers, while men wore robes in many parts of the world, like Greece, Persia and Rome, and some parts of Europe, but definitely not in the US, France or England. My grandmother grew up in the southern US, born in 1948, and was sent home from school one day as a teenager for wearing trousers. Pilots was a training program for boxers until NY ballerinas discovered it. That's actually incorrect. Pilots was actually created by a German man named Joseph Pilots, who created it for rehabilitation. His first patients were actually war veterans and then dancers. It's great for physiotherapy if you can actually find a physiotherapist trained in it. Most of the time it's basically another sport in the gym, made so ladies with those damn big dresses could sit down somewhere. A college degree. They used to be exclusively for men, and now the majority of degree holders are women. Where and how? I would expect more or less equal numbers. Read the title wrong and thought it said what sex toy is now used for another use like dildo combat, etc. Dildo combat. I wonder if there's a subreddit for that. Menstrual pads. First invented as combat first aid bandages in World War II, but female nurses found another use for them.